I know everyone always says their marriage didn't start out this bad, but I promise you in my case it's completely true. I met my husband when I was in my early 20s, and we immediately fell in love. Our relationship moved quickly after that, and it wasn't long before we got married and settled down. I never saw any worrying signs. Everything was so normal and cliche. We had the house with the white picket fence. My husband was a lawyer and made a very steady income. There weren't any problems at all back then. A few years into our marriage, we had a son, and that only made things better. He was our pride and joy, and the three of us all got along great. Again, we were just a normal, happy family. Then everything started to change. Over the years, my husband became different. He started acting controlling and angry all the time. There were very few days where he didn't yell at me or our son, and he never used to yell before. I don't know what happened. He just went completely psycho somehow. It wasn't just his behavior either. He started shaving his head and face to make himself completely bald. It happened out of the blue, too. One day, he had a full head of hair and a beard, and the next day, he was totally hairless. I didn't know what had gotten into him. At first, I just thought it was some bizarre midlife crisis, and he would eventually snap out of it. But he just kept getting worse. He acted like a lunatic more and more each day. I never knew what was going to happen next with him. One minute he would be calm, and then the next minute he'd be flying off the handle, or acting so immature that I would almost forget that he was in his 40s. My son and I actually became scared of him. After it had been going on for a while, I began to want a divorce. He just wasn't the man that I'd married anymore. The problem was that I was too scared to tell him, because I thought he would snap. If even little things could make him go into a rage, then I didn't want to find out what asking for a divorce would do. Still, I don't think that you could really say that we were married by that point. I avoided him as much as possible, and barely even spoke to him unless I had to. I even started sleeping in my son's room so that I wouldn't have to share a bed with the freak. Plus, I was afraid that my husband might hurt our son when he was on one of his rampages. Living with him made every day a nightmare. Not only was he angry and unreasonable, but he was also just creepy as hell. The way he shaved his head made him look like a different person, and he was always passive-aggressive in the most horrifying way. Sometimes he would come out of nowhere and start petting me or my son's head. Then he would say things like, "I'm not gonna hurt you. I wouldn't do that." Then he would smile like a creep afterwards and stare at us until we were able to get away. It was the most uncomfortable and disturbing thing ever. Every once in a while, I would actually lose it myself around him. I would tell him to screw off and leave us alone. Or I would just take our son and leave for the day without telling him. I didn't do it too often though, because whenever I did, my husband would snap and throw a huge fit that I would have to deal with later. He really had gone completely haywire. Then one night, I finally decided that I'd had enough. It was extremely late, and my son and I had to be up early the next day for work and school. We were both sound asleep when we were suddenly awakened by incredibly loud noises coming from downstairs. We could hear my husband laughing like a maniac and banging a bunch of stuff around. At first, I was just going to ignore it, like I'd been ignoring everything else that my husband did. But then I decided that it couldn't go on anymore. I was so tired of him ruining everything. I got out of bed and headed downstairs to confront my husband. My son followed behind me. When we got downstairs, we found my husband standing in the dining room, banging on the table and laughing like a psycho. He had obviously completely lost his mind.
What the hell are you doing? It's the middle of the night!
He stopped what he was doing and turned around as I yelled at him. I noticed then that he had some hair growing out of his head again. It was really messy and made him look even more psychotic. I thought for a second that he was going to start screaming, but he just stood there quietly and stared at us. I didn't know what was going on in his mind, but the silence was even more scary than him yelling. As he continued to stare at us creepily, I slowly started backing away towards my son.
What are you...
Then, out of nowhere, he suddenly pulled out a knife and lunged at us. "911, what's your emergency?"
I think you better come over and clean up my family's mess.
What's the problem, sir? Did you or somebody else do something to them?
I'm not gonna hurt them. I wouldn't do that.
Hello? Sir? All right? Hello?
This story was inspired by a man named Alex Murdaugh, who appeared to have a shaved head and a prison jumpsuit in his booking mugshot. The man was notorious on the internet for looking exactly like the famous Mr. Clean, but more notable for his heinous actions. On June 7th of 2021, Alex was accused of taking out his family. He was a disgraced lawyer gone mad, and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison and sent to one of the state's maximum security prisons. During the court hearing, Alex would repeatedly say something along the lines of, "I would never hurt them," over and over again. The judge said it was sad to see the defendant go from a lawyer who had practiced before him to a grieving father to a murderer.
Total Tools Mega Outdoor Power Event is on now. Get up to $2,000 to spend on more tools.
To a murderer.
I didn't meet either of my biological parents until I was in my 20s. I was adopted when I was only 2 years old, and I've been with my adopted family ever since. I never knew my birth parents. Once I got older though, I started to be more curious about them. So more recently, I located my biological father and reconnected with him. It was pretty awkward between us at first, but after a few weeks of spending time together, it got a lot better. There was only one problem. I had been dating this one guy for quite some time. He was a good bit older than me, but it worked out well. His age didn't really bother me, but ever since I started reconnecting with my biological father, things became very strange. Whenever I brought my boyfriend around my father, he would always act like a total jerk and get angry over the stupidest things. When I confronted him about it, all he would say is that he really didn't like my father for some reason. He never gave me any more information than that, even when I pressed him, but he continued to act differently whenever my father came around. They were both really important to me, and it didn't seem fair that I couldn't see them at the same time just because my boyfriend was being a jerk. Still, it wasn't an easy thing to get around. One night, when I was with my boyfriend, I got a call from my dad, inviting me and my boyfriend to a family dinner at his house on Valentine's Day. I thought it was a little strange to have a family dinner on Valentine's Day, but I didn't want to say no since I was afraid it would hurt my dad's feelings. The only problem was I didn't know what my boyfriend would think. When I told him about the plans, he responded a lot better than I expected. After hesitating at first, he agreed to go when I told him that it was important to me. I knew that it would probably be a little awkward, but I really wanted my boyfriend to get over his strange feelings towards my dad. I hoped that the family dinner might do the trick. When Valentine's Day arrived, my dad came and picked me and my boyfriend up in his car. My half-sister was with him. I'd only met her a couple of times, but she seemed cool, so I was excited to get to know her better. My dad lived a few hours away from us, so we had a pretty long drive. Finally, we arrived at my dad's house and sat down for dinner. It wasn't much better once we started eating either. The whole atmosphere was eerie and awkward for everyone. No one seemed comfortable. Even my dad was acting strange and quiet. Then, after no one had said anything for several minutes, my dad suddenly asked my boyfriend if he wanted more wine. My boyfriend agreed, but he seemed kind of scared about it for some reason. Everyone was so tense. I regretted agreeing to the evening in the first place, but I didn't know how to leave without being rude. My dad came back with wine and went to pour some in my boyfriend's glass. Then, out of nowhere, he smashed the bottle over my boyfriend's head. The next thing I knew, I was helping my sister dig a hole in the backyard. I was scared as hell. Then my dad came outside carrying a huge bag and threw it inside the hole.
Keep digging! You need to bury the whole thing!
My hands were shaking, and I started to cry, but I did as he said. I looked over at my sister to see that she was feeling the same, but she too continued to dig. We didn't have any other choice. Several days later, I was still at my dad's house. Each day had been a nightmare, as my dad somehow got progressively more scary and mad. I just didn't know where else to go. I felt totally trapped. Then one day, my dad was watching TV and getting drunk when he suddenly yelled at me and my sister to come downstairs. When we got there, he handed me a machete and told us that we had to go out and butcher the remains, then bury them again. He didn't want to risk anyone finding the body and recognizing it. We were terrified, but we did as we were told once again and headed to the backyard with the machete. A few hours later, we came back inside the house, both covered in blood. My dad told us to never say a word to anyone, and then he told my sister to run upstairs and shower. She immediately did so, obviously happy to be able to clean the disgusting filth off of herself. When the shower turned on, my dad suddenly stood up and walked over to me. He had a strange look in his eye as he got closer and closer. Then he slowly leaned in and kissed me. I resisted at first, but then I gave in. I realized then why he wanted my boyfriend out of the way. It all made sense. A few months after that, we got married. I don't know how it ever got to that point, but it just seemed right. It took something completely horrible to get us there, but it was all worth it. Unfortunately, it couldn't last. A few weeks after our wedding, the police came knocking at our door. Apparently, we were all under arrest for suspicion of murder. My boyfriend hadn't been seen in a long time, and we were the last people to be with him. The trial lasted a while, but my family and I were all eventually convicted and sent to prison. I've been here for almost a year now, and I won't be getting out anytime soon, all because of our deadly love triangle. In 2019, a love triangle involving a woman named Amanda McClure, her then boyfriend named John McGuire, and her birth father Larry McClure led to a horrific Valentine's Day night. Amanda was adopted as a child and had recently reunited with the birth father and her sister Anna. The father and sister picked Amanda and her boyfriend up from their Indiana residence. The group traveled back to Larry's home in West Virginia. While the visit initially went well, after a week, the father and two daughters began to plot the boyfriend's demise. On the day of Valentine's, the boyfriend was struck with a wine bottle, sedated, and tortured for 2 days before burying him in the backyard. They dug up his remains and dismembered them. Approximately 3 weeks after the ordeal, Amanda and her father got married. The body was later discovered, and all 3 suspects were immediately taken into custody and charged accordingly. Amanda and her boyfriend up from their Indiana residence.